Okay, I am live. And I just realized this t-shirt is not a good t-shirt. It looks like it's dirty. It's so old, but it's not. It's a printed t-shirt. I don't even know what that means. I just found it somewhere. Anyway, it's a printed t-shirt. That is not grease on the front of my t-shirt. So here we are. Wife is going to do an audio check.
Well, did you? I don't see you. Are you on public?
Yes, I am. So anybody gets on this during the live session, let me know how the audio is working.
Okay, now I see it.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, very good. Fine.
Fine. Okay, good. I've been having bad luck with my audio. I don't know what the problem is. Anyway, here we are. So I've actually got a bunch of topics that have been just bugging me lately, and I probably will do them in quick succession. Probably, maybe not today, but over the next couple of days. One of them, I'll say them right now to remind myself what they are. One of them is all this talk we're getting about, what was it? The solar radiation management. Yes, solar radiation management, SRM. It's absolutely driving me insane. And then the other one is the topic today, which is data control. Data control. And there was a third topic, which I can't remember. But anyway, I have a lot of stuff in my head right now. Just came in from working on the basement, working on my basement / bomb shelter at the same time that Pakistan and India are about to go nuclear. So timing could not be better, right? So today's topic, though, is data. So a headline that I saw today. And it's, okay, so this is going to be kind of nerdy. This is nerdy stuff. This is sciencey data stuff. Sirens. What's that about? Ambulances. This is sciencey data stuff, nerdy, numbery stuff. I'm not going to put any numbers up. I'm not going to put any charts up. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to bring to your attention again the overall trend in the Trump administration. And really, I mean, it's just more obvious with the Trump administration, but really the trend has been going on for 20 years, I guess, of sandbagging, covering, obfuscating the actual scope of our dilemma. So what it is that I'm talking about today is a headline that the Trump administration has found out, doesn't matter how, they found out that the NOAA, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration or Agency, I should look that up, has been keeping data on the cost of severe weather events. So severe weather events are things like hurricanes, tornado outbreaks, severe derechos, which are straight line winds, hail, floods, right? And you can have one calamity create multiple events. So when Hurricane Helene came ashore, there was hurricane damage. There was coastal hurricane damage, like, storm surge. And there was wind damage from the hurricane. The hurricane came ashore. Then that same hurricane, because this is how hurricanes are these days, when it traveled further inland, it found enough moisture and things in the soil to just keep turning, to keep spinning itself up. And it ended up in western North Carolina, and it dumped something like 22 inches of rain. That's the second event, right? It's and they've had probably winds and some other things, but by then it was sort of downgrading. It was probably nothing much more than a extra tropical low, but nevertheless, it was able to dump some 20 or 22 inches of rain on western North Carolina and destroy those people. They're done. They will never again be part of anything. They're finished, probably forever. But these are disasters, right? And all these things have a cost. And I like to tell my wife, when there's a big tornado outbreak and there's 40 tornadoes, or sometimes it's 150 that go across the landscape in the course of 36 hours, I'll say, okay, that's $1 billion event. I'll just say it. That's $1 billion event. How many homes get swept up and damaged? And when you find these when they go in later and they examine these areas where these tornadoes go through, the homes are slabbed, right? It's just gone. It's just gone. There's nothing left but the concrete foundation or slab. And the cars are crumpled up like Godzilla has been eating them, right? They're just crumpled up into little balls of twisted metal. And so these are really expensive events. Plus, there's going to be follow-up events, which is why we have agencies like FEMA that they stay for a while and they work with these communities for all the follow-up expenses. If a governor declares a national emergency, then FEMA comes in and they start handing out money, and some of it is immediately to the people who are the victims. They'll give them a debit card, a little plastic debit card with some money on it, and that way they kind of know how much money they're giving out, right? They can go back later and say, okay, we gave out 50,000 of these cards. Each one had $500 on it, so we know that much money was spent in the immediate to help people just survive for the next 48 hours, right? Or the next 72 hours. And then, of course, they stay and they come back, and there's FEMA loans and FEMA advisors and all these people. There's counselors who show up, to help people with their PTSD and their other traumas. And there's all these expenses associated with this. Well, FEMA is a government agency, and they have to keep track of every dime they spend. And of course, then the insurance industries come along, and they have to send out their insurance adjusters, and they look at all these houses and they say, how much was it worth? And they look at the county tax rolls and they decide how much this thing was worth. And then if there is insurance, if there's not insurance, then of course none of this happens. But FEMA probably does. Again, they're there. They're supposed to be helping people restore their lives. And so if the insurance industry doesn't do it, FEMA might go in and say, oh, you lost your house. You have insurance? You don't? Oh, okay. Well, let's look at what we can do for you, if anything. So there's an army of people who show up after one of these events. And for days and weeks and months and sometimes years, they spend money. And so that's the cost of this event. That's the cost. And so when I tell my wife, oh yeah, we just had a tornado outbreak hit the U.S. Southwest, there was 120 tornadoes, 150 tornadoes. That's going to cost $1 billion. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the FEMA money, the insurance payouts, the cost of rebuilding things. Even if you didn't have insurance, you still may want to rebuild. So it's going to cost money. Well, the NOAA has been collecting that data for a while. Why not? Because climate change is real. And so maybe one of the questions we're going to ask at some point in the future is, well, if you say there's a cost to fighting climate change, and you think there's a tax hit or something from putting a carbon tax on gasoline, and you think we're going to cause problems to the economy, what about the cost of these events? It costs a lot of money when a person's home is slabbed and their car is crumpled up and thrown into the next county. It also costs money when people die. There's insurance payouts on life insurance policies, and of course, then there's funeral arrangements have to have, and then there's costs to businesses that lose employees, and costs in productivity. And there's a cost to employees who become unemployed when a business is destroyed by severe weather. So it's really complicated, and people have to figure this out, and it can take months and months. Well, the NOAA has been collecting this data and summarizing it basically for policymakers. Oh, and by the way, the IPCC process, and we've had 6, I think we're putting together the 7th IPCC report right now. They do this too, but not just for the US. Of course, they do it globally. And the IPCC goes around, they collect all this data from the insurance industries and all this data from the governments of all the world, and all this data from the IMF and everything else, the World Health Organization. They collect all this data, and they can say, how much does it cost to not deal with global heating and climate change and global, they can tell you. If you're worried that it's going to cost you money if you stop driving and flying and moving goods and your economy and GDP and everything else, they'll tell you, oh yeah, well, it's going to cost you money anyway, because we're losing homes and businesses and people's lives. There's a cost associated with that too. It's not GDP. It's not, economic growth. It's not capitalism. It's not those things. I'll take my glasses off. But it's money. So they've been collecting this data. So the long and the so that's where the data comes from. The long and the short is somehow the Trump administration got wind of this activity, that the NOAA, which is responsible for a lot of our climate research, has gone beyond just collecting climate data and began collecting data on the cost of climate change, global heating. They found out about that and they said, stop doing that. You can't do that. Well, this could be valuable. To who? Well, if we ever have to make policy to address global heating, then we'll want to know what the cost is, because you're going to want to do a stupid cost benefit analysis. And we're keeping track of the deaths, and we're keeping track of the homes lost. We're keeping track of the real estate that's lost, and we're keeping track of the cost. They're not generating that data. They're just pooling it together because the insurance companies are doing it. The insurance industry is doing it. The IPCC is doing it. And all the NOAA is doing is they're just bringing it together, putting it in the database. And the Trump administration said, don't do that. And so they're stopping doing that. They're not going to do that anymore. Now, the insurance industry still does that. And the IPCC report might still contain that information. But the Trump administration, anytime, they're just shitty, okay? They're just shitty. Anytime they can get in the way of you and me knowing what all of this is amounting to. Anytime they can do that. Anytime they can hamstring our ability to understand our calamity, they do it because they're shitty. Now, it's important to note that just because they won't allow the NOAA to collate and funnel down the information doesn't mean the information isn't out there. So you could still get the information, but they don't want the NOAA to do that. If you want to do it, go ahead. If you're on the board of an insurance company, then you probably have information like that available to you, because the insurance industry and the insurance companies are constantly reassessing their risk due to global heating. They're dropping policies in California left and right for people who are in the way of disasters caused by global heating and climate change. A little less the climate change part, because no one can really assess that, but definitely the global heating, definitely the fires, definitely the storms, definitely the sea level rise. That's all global heating. That's all physics. Just physics in your face, straight up Newtonian dynamics, Earth system science. Physics, my dude. Physics is going to rip your face off. And it's not a hoax. When your face is ripped off, that won't be a hoax either. But they're just going to be shitty about it. They're going to say, we don't want you to know. Now, they're also going after the NOAA in other ways. They don't want them to write grants to study climate change. They don't want to use tax funds to study Earth system dynamics. They don't want to use tax funds to run the big models they have to run all the time to do climate predictions, which they do all the time, by the way. They do. The NOAA and the National Weather Service, working with them, they do climate projections for the United States all the time. Mostly because they want to know where the droughts are going to be or where the heavy rainfall is going to be. Not that people will do anything differently. Farmers might. Farmers probably do like to know where the droughts are going to be and how long the droughts might last. Okay, so just strictly as a business matter, they just want to know. They don't care about climate change. It's all a hoax, and if it's not a hoax, it's caused by the Chinese. But they do want the climate data. I don't know how they balance all that in their head, but they're farmers, so maybe it's not difficult. They're Midwestern MAGA-ite inbred pinheads. So it's easy for them to just ignore things that don't line up properly. They think climate change is a hoax, but they really, really, really want that climate data. Well, the Trump administration is going after all that. You're not going to get any of that. The farmers won't get it either because they don't want it to be discussed. And I was a little curious about, okay, why are they going after the Weather Service? Because the Weather Service are a bunch of climate deniers. So you would kind of think they would leave those guys alone because they're denying climate change all the time. They don't think there's global heating. They don't think there's global warming. They don't think that there's global climate change. They think it's all a hoax. They don't think that that the uh, the CO2 level in the atmosphere makes any difference. The weather people don't think that humans can change the weather until they feel like they want to say that human beings can change the weather, because there's dark conspiracies everywhere on the internet about people changing the weather, except that people can't change the weather through consumption of fossil fuels. They can change the weather using technology, using chemtrails, using occult sciences, appealing to the devil or demons. They can change the weather lots of ways, except they can't change the weather by burning fossil fuels. That's kind of your basic weatherman. And it's sad. But they're not much of a threat as a consequence. They'll have 5 conspiracies about why we're having all these record hot years. If they even address it at all, they'll have 5 conspiracies as to why this year is hotter than last year, and last year was hotter than the year before. If they even address it, if they even let it come up as a topic, they'll have 5 conspiracies, each more wacky than the one before. But one of them will not be consumption of fossil fuels. So I don't understand at first why the Trump administration is going after the Weather Service, because they're kind of working the same side of the street. They're all in denial. Except then I realized, oh, I know something the National Weather Service does, because I watch these storm chaser channels like Max Velocity and Ryan Hall on YouTube. And I'm interested in them because it's data. For me, it's data. I get to watch all this stuff happening in real time, and then I can reflect on it later. And sometimes these guys will let the mask slip off a little bit, and they'll, especially Max, because he's kind of young, and he'll say something like, "I've never seen this before," or "This is crazy," or "What is going on here?" And he is processing it as a weather guy. But there's something stopping him from just saying, well, I guess this is a sign of global heating, because it is. This is what the scientists who study the Earth system have been warning us about. He won't connect the dots, at least not on a live stream in public, where the people who live in the Midwest and live in the Southeast and live in Florida, and they're all denialists and they're all Trumpites and MAGAites. And if he said anything in that context, they'd all unsubscribe. Right? They'd unsubscribe from his channel, and then his revenue base evaporates. So he can't say that. But he gets close. And I've heard Ryan Hall say things close to that too. Like when things are really bad, there's a huge tornado outbreak, he'll kind of let it slip. He's like, there's something going on here. I've heard him say something like that. There's something going. This makes you think there's something going on. And I'm like, okay, like what? Something like what? Yeah, are you going to say it? But then he doesn't, right? So maybe they know these weathermen. Maybe they know and they're just afraid to say anything. It's a possibility. Maybe they don't know and they're kind of figuring it out the hard way. That's a possibility. I don't know what's up with these weather people, but they're all on the same side of the street as the Trump administration. So why is the Trump administration going after the National Weather Service? And it's because of the bad data. The National Weather Service does this thing they do, and it's a good thing to be doing because it's trying to save property and lives. So it makes sense. And what they do is they issue severe weather alerts. Severe weather alerts. Well, they're the Weather Service. They know, right? They know. And there's a storm prediction center. That seems important. A storm prediction center. They're not doing climate data. They're not doing the world's climate. They're not doing global anything. They're doing it for the United States of America. They're doing storm prediction. There's a storm prediction center, SPC. And they issue these alerts, and they'll say something like, there's going to be a big tornado outbreak, and they know a day in advance. There's going to be a huge rainstorm. There's going to be hail the size of grapefruits, and they know these things. That's their job. They're the Storm Prediction Center. How do they know these things? They've been doing storm predictions for a long time. Okay, let's just allow, just allow that they figured it out. Oh, and by the way, their their record is pretty good. I wouldn't want these guys doing climate predictions because climate is way too difficult. Uh, but in terms of storm prediction, like let's get this information out a couple of hours before it hits people, a half of a day before it hits. I've seen Max predicting because he does daily weather updates. They're like 10 minutes long. He does daily weather updates, and I've seen him predict like on a Monday that there's going to be a big storm that arrives on Thursday. And of course on Tuesday he makes the same prediction, and on Wednesday he'll make the same prediction, except it's usually worse, right? And he'll be saying, but he's looking at the Storm Prediction Center output. He's looking at the National Weather Service output and predictions, and all their reports, and all the satellite data, and all the model runs, and they have this data. So that's when I began to realize, oh, shoot, of course, the Trump administration is going to go after the National Weather Service. Of course they're going to do that. They don't want people to know. Now, that's a big conspiracy and tinfoil hat, and you lost your cotton picking mind and all this kind of stuff. It's like, no. And they're getting rid of the database where the aftermath was also being analyzed. The database that was collecting all the data about the aftermath of these severe weather events, which are just weather, not climate, weather related. That database is now defunct. Why? That seems like it could be really important data. There's not even really any expense. There's just the NOAA is just collecting it. It's being generated. The actual data is being generated by corporations and the World Meteorological Organization, the WMO, and a bunch of other places. NASA is not really in the business of doing, insurance actuarial models. They're just collecting the data from organizations and individuals and agencies, foreign and domestic, that are willing to share. But the Trump administration is getting rid of that. They're telling them, oh, stop doing that. Why? Of all the things that you would stop, why that one? And if you're not on board with this idea that the Republicans they've absolutely lost their fucking minds. If you're not on board with that, then the fact that the Trump administration is going to remove this data from public availability just doesn't make any sense. We should have that data. We should know this. Could be really important. We need to know how much this is costing us, because for some people, you think that having your house slabbed would be important to know. Okay, but maybe that's not important to you, but wouldn't you want to know how much these weather events are costing? We predict the storms come, they fuck us up. The FEMA goes in, they spend the money, they hand out the credit cards, they get people back on their feet. The insurance companies come, they look at the blown away communities, they figure out the cost, they write the check for the insurance payout, they help them rebuild. The construction companies come in, the county needs their property taxes paid. Everybody does the thing. It's not like the event doesn't happen. It's not like the checks aren't written. It's not like no one's paying for this. They just don't want you to know. That's it. And how do you reconcile that with anything that happens in the universe? These events are happening. They're destroying people's lives. They're destroying businesses. They're destroying entire communities. Some of these tornado outbreaks will flatten an entire community, just flatten it. There's nothing left. The money is going to be paid. The insurance payouts are going to be there. The insurance adjusters are going to be on the ground. FEMA is going to show up. They're going to hand out money. They're going to set up the FEMA tents. They're going to bring in the Red Cross. They're going to bring in the Red Crescent. They're going to do everything that has to be done. They're going to get these people back on their feet. They're going to feed them, house them, give them water, give them new clothing. Everybody's going to show up. Everybody's going to descend on this community. They're going to spend all the money. They're going to help all the people. They're going to document every goddamn thing that happens. They're going to figure out how big the tornado was. They're going to figure out how much rain was dropped. They're going to figure out what the cost is. They're going to figure out who's going to pay for it. And then they're going to make sure it happens. But the Trump administration doesn't want you to know. It's going to happen. They don't want you to know that it happened. You're not going to know. And when they're going after the National Weather Service, and I'm wondering, why would they? They're not dealing with climate. They're not even doing science. They're running computer models, and they're doing storm prediction. And they're telling people, get out of the way of this storm. Get into your bunker. Get to higher ground. That's all they're doing. They're not doing any climate work. Why the hell would the Trump administration be defunding parts of the National Weather Service? What the actual fuck is that about? That's a complete disconnect. Oh, wait. Oh, hell, of course. The National Weather Service and the Storm Prediction Center are issuing alerts. Well, I guess we can't have that. I guess we can't have people becoming afraid of the weather. I guess we can't have people worrying about their house being slabbed. I guess we can't have people worrying about hurricanes coming ashore and dumping 22 inches of rain in 6 hours. I guess we can't have people worrying about that stuff. Of course, it'll still happen. If Donald Trump tells you that gravity is a hoax and you decide to jump off the top of a building to test that, you're going to die. Because gravity is not a hoax. He can say it's a hoax, and you can believe it's a hoax. And you can believe that because it's a hoax, that Newton was wrong, and Einstein was wrong, and we never went to the moon, and the earth is flat, and rocketry is baloney, and you can think all these things. And then you jump off the top of a building and you die. Because it's not a hoax. Gravity is real. It doesn't matter what these guys say. And it doesn't matter what you believe. And it doesn't matter if they gut the National Weather Service and the Storm Prediction Center so that nobody knows what's coming. It's still going to come. So why are they doing this? There's this thing I call three little monkeys. I'll just say it. Sometimes I just say it to myself. Well, that's three little monkeys. And you've seen the three little monkeys. It's a meme, right? It's a meme. It's been a meme for 150 years. It's a meme, right? See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, right? Three little monkeys. Or chimps, or whatever you think they are. Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. And that's what they're doing. You can't hear it. You can't see it. And you can't talk about it. They won't let you do those three things. You're not going to hear it. You're not going to see it. And then when it hits you, I mean, maybe, well, let's say it hits you and it kills you. All right, well, you're not a problem for anybody except the insurance companies. And, that's a different kind of problem. That's an economic problem. Oh, and by the way, when you rebuild your house, or even when someone buries you, that's money that goes into the economy. That's part of the GDP. Do you know that? Your death and the cost of burying you is somebody's profit. That's GDP. And your home being rebuilt from the slab up, that's a disaster for you. And now you have another loan, and maybe now you have two loans or whatever is your situation. And but that's part of the GDP. You just made business for somebody, some contractor, and all of his crews, and then the landscapers, and then the interior decorations, and you have to buy all new appliances and carpets and drapes and the clothing and everything, right? Your disaster is part of the GDP. The gross domestic product. You having to build your house over again every 4 years, which happens in Florida, it happens all the time. Lots of people have had to completely rebuild their homes after storm surges, like every 2 or 3 years, sometimes back to back. Now, there's a story. You go look that one up. That is a story that never gets talked about. Three little monkeys. Oh, baby. They don't ever talk about that, because they want you to buy one of those houses in Florida. They don't want you to know that this person who's selling this house is getting out for a reason, that they've been flooded out 3 times in 5 years. They've been flooded out 3 times in 5 years. They completely had to rebuild their house 3 times in 5 years. And now they're getting the fuck out, and they're going to sell you their lemon, right? There's no talk about what's happening in Florida. People are leaving because of those kinds of things. Oh, and the insurance companies are leaving. But hey, three little monkeys. If we never talk about it, then it never happened. Now it does happen. So what is it? What are these people doing? What is the Trump administration doing? They know that that this country and their reputation and their ability to hold power for all time is in the jaws of disaster. Because what's happening with the Earth dynamic system right now is an absolute dumpster fire. And people are going to notice. And so they are busy running around, gutting the National Weather Service, gutting the NOAA, getting rid of the Storm Prediction Center, getting rid of the database of the costs of all these disasters. They're going to get rid of the YouTubers who do the storm chasing. They're going to make it illegal to talk about climate change. They're going to make it illegal to talk about global heating. They're going to make it illegal to be on site at these places when these tornadoes have gone through. It's all going to be whatever they want to call it. They'll call it, you're a terrorist. They'll just label you a fucking terrorist because you're terrifying people. You're following, you got your camera out and you're following the tornado, and the tornado's on the ground and the tornado's in the air and the car is up in the air and the cows are being lifted up into the air and you got your camera, and they're going to call you a fucking terrorist. Son, what are you doing? Oh, I'm documenting this. All right, you're coming with me, you goddamn terrorist. And they'll just make it illegal. Oh, Cougar, you just get off the Kool-Aid. You tinfoil hat, you're a conspiracy. No, that's what they're going to do. They don't have a choice. They have no choice because for 70 goddamn years, they've sat on this. For 70 years, they've sat on this. They've known since the late 1800s this was coming. Didn't know the details, fair enough. But they've been knowing a lot of the details recently, and they've even got the data. The NOAA has a database, did have a database of the costs of global heating, the actual costs. These events are costing money, and the amount of money it's costing is going up all the time. And they had a database. And if you took the data and you drew a line through it, line goes like this. Woo! Someone saw that and said, well, well, we can't have that. Well, the line goes up. That's what the line does. Yeah, but you can't tell people that. Why the fuck not? That shouldn't they know? Sorry, you're a terrorist now. I'm a terrorist. Why? Because of data? Well, no, because you're telling people data. They should know. No, only a terrorist would think that way. Only a terrorist would want to make people afraid of what's happening to them. Only a terrorist would point out that these systems are getting more powerful all the time. Only a terrorist would predict a storm. Only a terrorist would say that there's going to be 22 inches of rain on your head in the next 72 hours. Only a terrorist would tell people to evacuate. Only a terrorist would tell people to get to higher ground. Only a terrorist would tell people that you can't live here anymore. You're a terrorist. We have an all expense paid room for you at Gitmo, or maybe El Salvador. Maybe they just send your ass to El Salvador, disappear you. You want to be a terrorist? Go be a terrorist at the maximum security mega prison in El Salvador. Yeah, we'll let you out of there in 30 years when you're all shriveled up and your brain is rotted. Terrorist. Yes, that's exactly what they're doing. That's exactly what they're going to do. And they have no choice because they've sat on this for 30 fucking years. Now they're afraid. Now, in fairness, they thought that everything that's happening now, which is, like I say, a dumpster fire, wasn't going to happen until the year 2100. That's what the IPCC reports said back in the day. And then it was like, well, maybe by 2050. Well, that's still a long time. 2050, hell, we'll all be dead. More importantly, we won't be in office. And so, 2050 is not so bad. But, science had no business trying to predict when all of this was going to go down. Turns out it's going down tomorrow afternoon. And they're scared. They thought that they could just wait it out, have their stuff money in their pockets and smoke the big cigars and drink the wine and drink the expensive bourbon and go to the whorehouses and enjoy the dancing girls and then retire. But that's looking less likely now. Now, climate change is here. Global heating is here. These people are like deer in the headlights time for them. It's deer in the headlights time. They're scared. These politicians are scared. They're scared. You know what they're scared of? You and me. That we're going to get angry. That after they've sat on this for all this time, that we're going to start connecting the dots, bitch, and they're going to be Mussolini'd. Mussolini lied to the Italians back in 1928, 1930. He told them, we're going to be great. We're going to recreate the Roman Empire. We're going to kick the communists out of the country. We're going to make Italy great again. Mega, right? Make Italy great again. And we're going to do all these things. And, he was always, standing up there, puffing up his chest and doing all this. It didn't happen. Instead, Italy got wiped out in the Second World War. And when those people caught him for lying to them about how, of course, they're being stupid listening to him in the first place, but they loved the speeches and they loved the mugging and they loved, that he was beating people up and they loved, it's like bread and circuses back in the old Roman times, back at the end of the Roman Empire, all those crazy emperors and the bread and circuses and all the distractions. They loved it. But he lied to them. And when it didn't come through and they were embarrassed and it cost them all their money and they were bankrupt and the war destroyed them again, they killed him. Mussolini got Mussolini'd. It was ugly. Look it up. He did not retire. He did not ride off into the sunset on his gold-plated horse, okay? So these people, they're worried that they're going to get Mussolini'd, that they've been lying to people. They said it was a hoax. They figured that's okay. We can say that now because they won't even know the difference for 50 years. But it turns out they're going to know the difference. The people are going to know it's not a hoax and that they've been lied to tomorrow afternoon. And they're running around trying to cover it up. What else can you expect them to do? They're corrupt. They're dumb. They're dumb. They're so fucking retarded. These are dumb people. These politicians are stupid. They can't see past the current kerfuffle, whatever it is. They got caught with their hand in the cookie jar. That they got caught, grabbing women between the legs. That they got caught with their mistress. That they got caught taking money from the Saudis. That they got caught in some sort of corrupt financial deal or some corrupt, real estate deal or whatever. They can't see past their current corruption to look down the road to a point where people having connected dots are going to Mussolini you. They're dumb. They're greedy and they're dumb. And that's a bad combination. Now, they're surrounded by dumb people. And the dumb people would like to get some of that moolah. So the dumb people are kind of going with the greed. They're like, okay, we'll stick to you. And if I stick to you, then even though I'm dumb and uneducated and can't do anything for myself, I'll get some of this good from you, right? It'll trickle down like the way pee will trickle down. And so everybody's thinking. But when they realize that there was this whole other thing going on over here in left field called global heating, and it's slabbing people's houses and it's turning their cars into pretzels and it's killing people, it's destroying their jobs, destroying their lives, destroying their communities. It's all being destroyed. And they've been lied to for 30 years, at least 30 years, maybe, absolutely for 30 years, more like 150. But anyway, certainly for 30 years, since most of them have been adults, they've been lied to by these dumb, greedy, corrupt politicians. And if the people ever figure this out in large enough numbers, they're going to Mussolini a bunch of people. You lied. You knew. You hid the databases. You stopped allowing the National Weather Service to help us get out of the way of these severe weather events. You gutted the Storm Prediction Center so they couldn't predict storms, which is like their whole reason for existing. You hid this from us at a time when we would have liked to have known what the costs were of these disasters. Because if the cost is going up, that's our lives. You're talking about our lives. And FEMA running out of money. And oh, and by the way, that's the other thing they're doing. How can I forget that? They're gutting FEMA. They don't want FEMA. They don't want the Federal Emergency Management Agency showing up at these disasters after the fact. The talk about getting rid of FEMA began right after Hurricane Katrina blew into New Orleans and Louisiana and killed a bunch of black people. FEMA showed up. This was George Bush, George W., I think. Yeah, George W. for sure. George W. Bush, rich Texan. The media, I'm talking about FEMA now. I'm just showing you how corrupt this all is. It's been going on a long time. FEMA shows up in New Orleans. The media had been portraying people in New Orleans, black people, as being looters and lawless. Well, of course they were. They were dying. They had no food. No one brought them water. It was hot. It was humid. There were dead bodies floating around in the water. It was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. So of course they were breaking into stores and trying to find the bottled water. It's either that or die and join the bodies floating in the flood. Okay, so of course they were trying to save themselves. You would do exactly the same thing. You'd be right in there trying to get the water and the medicine and the food, and you'd be like, I don't care what it looks like on the evening TV. Trying to survive here. And so because it all looked like this terrible thing was happening, all this looting and everything else, then when FEMA shows up and starts, handing out money to people, okay, here's some water for you, here's some food for you, and here's some baby diapers, and here's some baby formula. And people said, oh my God, you're helping those criminals? FEMA is helping those criminals? And the people in this country, after they saw night after night of looting, and then FEMA shows up and starts helping people, which is, what they're supposed to do, which is what they did in the Western North Carolina, by the way. Well, then people hated it. FEMA, oh my God, they're a bunch of communists. They're helping these people who are looters and criminals and probably should be shot on sight. There was actually talk like that during the New Orleans disaster. Shoot them. Don't give them money. They're looters. They're criminals. Shoot them. You don't even put them in prison. Don't even give them a trial date. Just shoot them on the spot. And the bodies floating in the water. It's like, there's people dying already. Why are we shooting people who are just trying to survive? Because they're criminals and they're doing this and that. It's like, and FEMA showed up, started helping these people, which was like late, by the way. It took them like a week to show up, or 10 days. It was horrific. It was unbelievable how long it took FEMA to show up. And then after that, it was like, oh, we got to defund FEMA. Oh my God, FEMA, they're just woke and they're progressives and they should have been shooting those people on sight and this and that, and it was terrible. And we have to defund FEMA, get rid of FEMA. And as soon as they got Donald Trump for his second administration, right there in Project 2025, I'm sure there's paragraphs after paragraphs of what we're going to do to FEMA. And FEMA is being decommissioned. It's being taken apart. And they're not going to show up to any disasters because they're done. Now, the irony is, of course, a lot of those people who, were looking at what's happening in New Orleans with those colored people and why aren't they being shot? Now they would like to have some FEMA. Western North Carolina, when they were wiped out by Hurricane Helene, they were hoping for some FEMA. And maybe they got some, but the next big disaster won't because FEMA is being defunded. Elon Musk is in there throwing them out of their jobs and the money's being taken away. And they got a bad reputation now because of New Orleans. And we don't need FEMA. We need people to toughen up. We need, freedoms and more guns and all this kind of stuff. But we don't need FEMA because people should suffer. Builds character or something. Suffer. So that's what's going to happen. People are going to suffer. And they're not even going to know that they're about to suffer because the National Weather Service isn't going to issue alerts because they've been defunded. And the Storm Prediction Center isn't going to be predicting the storms because they've been defunded. And the NOAA isn't going to be providing satellite data because they've been defunded. And that's what happens when you spend 30 years fucking around and not solving a problem that you think will be gone by the time that you think will only be a problem when you are gone. You've had your political career, you've raked in the dough, you've done the dancing girls and the expensive cigars, you've done all that, you've retired. No one knows where you went after you retired. No one's going to remember that you did absolutely nothing for 30 years, sat on your ass while all this was brewing up. And then one day it blows up, people connect the dots and they go Mussolini a bunch of people, but it's not you. It's not you because you've retired. So when it comes time for you to try and decide what to do about global heating, you're just going to say, the best thing for me to do right now, today, 2025, in this year, 2025, is to just make sure people can't understand. We don't want them angry. We don't want them frightened. We don't want them, forming groups. We don't want them on YouTube. We don't want them in chat rooms. We don't want them making their plans about storming the Capitol because we've lied to them. So let's just let them not have the information. Make sure they never know what hit them. And when they die, that solves the problem. If they don't die, FEMA never shows up. We never record the data. We never know what happened. And that also solves the problem. And later on, when these people don't rebuild and they scatter and they go live in other communities, no one will ever be able to contact these people. They'll be living in weird places. They'll be living in a single wide mobile home in North Dakota. And they're not going to, no one's ever going to be able to recontact them and say, hey, didn't you used to live in Florida? Didn't you used to live in Mississippi or Kentucky or Tennessee? Why are you living in North Dakota? Well, it's a long story. Sit down here and I'll tell you. FEMA never came. The insurance adjusters never came. I didn't have insurance. I never rebuilt my home. For all I know, it's still a concrete slab. And I had to, and my business that I used to own or I used to work for, they disappeared too. So I had no income, no business, no home, no car, no insurance payout, no savings, no anything. So I used a little bit of my savings, and I went to North Dakota and bought a single wide, and now I sit in here and drink Jack Daniels all day and watch TV and bitch about the woke and the progressives. That's an outcome that these motherfuckers would rather have. The people never know what hit them. They never get together to talk about it. They never connect the dots. Most of them die or their lives are destroyed, and no one ever talks to them or tries to help them. And it never happened. It never happened. And if there's no prediction that it's coming, then it doesn't happen. If there's no satellite data, then it never happened. If there's no one on the ground to pick up the pieces later, then it never happened. You'll never hear about it. And the people who are affected will never hear about it. They'll just be destroyed. And they'll never know what happened to them. And no one will ever help them. And if they ever ask questions, why did this happen to me? They'll get no answers. Because it's all a hoax. 3 little monkeys. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. 3 little monkeys. And that's what you get. That's what you get. That's all you get now. Is a nagging suspicion that something is wrong. And maybe your new neighbor came from Florida or Tennessee. Hey, neighbor, how are you? Not good. Lost my wife. And, I'm trying to pull my life back together again. Wow, really? Lost your family and you're trying to start over? Yeah, it just came out of nowhere. We had no warning. We even had a storm shelter, but the tornado just came out of nowhere. And the weather people were saying, oh, there might be some rain, but they didn't tell us there was going to be a storm, a tornado outbreak. They never told us there's going to be 110 mile an hour winds across my front yard. They never told me. And after it happened, no one ever came. So now I'm living in a single wide mobile home in North Dakota, drinking myself blind. Can't even start over. People just vanish. And if that continues, if enough people just vanish, it's just like a big mystery. They die or they disappear. They just quietly give up and just go away. try and start over, become homeless somewhere, become homeless right down the street from my house where all these other homeless people are. To drink themselves blind every night because of what happened to them. Then it never happened. And that's a solution. That's a solution to for 30 years we did nothing. You just hide the fact. And it's all data. You wouldn't know what was happening in Western North Carolina. That's Appalachia. You wouldn't know what happened to those people in Western North Carolina after Hurricane Helene sat on their heads and dumped 22 inches of water. You would never know. Except that there was data, there was reporting, there were reporters on the ground, there was FEMA. They came, they wrote checks. And by the way, this is how much FEMA is hated by these people. FEMA came, Federal Emergency Management Agency. They came as fast as they could. Basically, as soon as the storm passed, as soon as the waters receded and it was safe to be there, okay? And the first responders had dug as many bodies out of the rubble as they could, found as many corpses as they could. It was safe to be there, and they weren't going to be in the way, okay? It was safe for FEMA to be there. They started handing out debit cards to people. No questions asked. Here you are. You're in this town. Okay. Where do you live? You live up in that canyon? Okay. Here's some money. Here's some money. You can eat at the restaurants. You can use this money to get a hotel room. You can use this money to get on a plane and leave if you want to. We don't care what you do with it. We just want you to be okay. We know that the banks are closed. You don't have a job anymore. You can't even get your money out of the bank because the banks have no power. And the area is flooded and everything is screwed up. So we're just going to give you a debit card. You can go to any store and swipe this thing and type in a PIN. It's just like any other debit card. Swipe this thing and you can get whatever you need to eat. You can get new clothes. You can get a hotel room. You can buy a new cell phone so you can talk to your family in some other part of the country. Whatever you want to do. Here's some money. It's just going to get you started, okay? Because right now you're broken. Right now you're busted. And they were handing out these cards to people, basically no questions asked. Because if you were in that part of the country, you're fucked, pretty much. So they handed out these cards, no questions asked. And you know what people did? They complained. They complained and they were bitter. They were bitter. I've lost everything. I've lost my job. I lost my spouse. I lost my dog and my truck. And they give me a card with $1,000 on it. That's all I got. And those people in New Orleans who were looters, when FEMA showed up, they made them whole. They bought them new houses. They got trailers. They got everything. They got college educations. They got new pickup trucks. They made their lives marvelous. What do I get when I'm up here in Appalachia with all the inbred Jeds? And we've all got dogs and guns and pickup trucks. We all voted for Trump. What do I get? I get a debit card with $1,000 on it. And what they didn't understand was that's just to get you through the next 72 hours, you fucking pinhead. You retarded, inbred asshole. That's $1,000, no questions asked, so that you can spend the next 72 hours doing something other than starving to death. Is that okay? Resented it. They resented it. Now FEMA's defunded. No one's going to get a debit card with $1,000 on it. How do I feel about that? Suck it up, buttercup. Welcome to the land of unintended consequences. They are gutting our ability to respond to this. They are gutting our ability to get data, to understand what's happening to us. They're not going to let us talk about this. They're not going to let us get together and compare notes. They're not going to let us have any journalism or anything about this. You're not going to know. And FEMA's not going to show up. And they're not going to give you a debit card for the next 72 hours so you don't die of starvation and dehydration. You're going to get nothing because we can't give you anything. We might accidentally give it to some lowly scumbag. when it's their turn to be slabbed and have their car turned upside down and twisted into a ball of metal. They might have the wrong skin color. They might be in a blue state. They might be woke. My goodness, we can't give a debit card with $1,000 on it to a woke person who probably drove an electric car. And since we can't give it to them, we can't give it to you. Because, it's not fair. You need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You need to, America strong. You need to be tough. You've got money, right? You got money in the bank. You don't have your credit card or your debit card because it's all in your wallet, which is now washed out to sea. But whatever, right? You got a business. You're a business owner. You work for a car parts place, whatever it is, right? Strong industry, blue collar America. Riveters and coal miners and shipbuilders, and so go figure your shit out. Because we're not going to give you anything. Because 30 years ago, somebody gave something to a person with dark skin, and that was it. That was it. So now we can't do that anymore. FEMA? Oh, yeah. FEMA. What a joke. They give money to looters. They don't even shoot people on site. They don't even give them bullets, which is what they really need. They give them money. They give them a debit card so they can buy water and baby formula. That's not America. Giving people shit. FEMA giving disaster victims anything. That's not America. That's socialism. That's communism. That's Marxism. And you're woke and you're progressive and drive an electric car, a bunch of limp dick weenies. And no, we're not going to have FEMA. FEMA. I know what they did. I know what they do. They're woke. They're progressive. Can't have FEMA. Yeah, I'm a little stirred up about this. And okay. You're not going to know. You're not going to know what hit you. I'm telling you right now, what's going to hit you is global heating. Your dynamic system is going to pick you up by the scruff of the neck and wad you up like a rag, like a piece of paper, and throw you into the dumpster to burn along with everybody else, because we're all going to burn. It's called global heating, and everything is going to burn. And you're not going to know until it happens to you. And then it's too late. You couldn't get out of the way. And the insurance company isn't coming. And FEMA is not coming. And the army isn't coming. Except if you start looting. Yeah, well, we got bullets for that. Yeah, if you try to save yourself by breaking into a 7-Eleven and getting some water, yeah, well, you'll be staring at a hail of gunfire for that. You looter, you woke progressive looter, taking what isn't yours. Because FEMA's sure as hell not going to give you anything. A bottle of water? Ha! Bottle of water. You're not getting anything, Sparky. Yeah, and you better not break that window and go into that shop, because this is America. And if you need water and you can't find water, well, then that's your problem. Because there's no FEMA. We're not managing emergencies. What was it? Kentucky just recently declared a state emergency. Contacted Donald Trump on the phone. Excuse me, Mr. President. Oh, and Kentucky, of course, a red state. And Sarah Huckabee is a Nepo baby of her daddy Huckabee, who ran for president. Big Republican, big conservative. He's retired now. She runs the state. She's a Nepo baby, nepotism. And so she calls the president. Oh, we're having a disaster down here in the state of Kentucky. He said, not my problem. Fuck you. She's like, what? This is Sarah Huckabee calling the president of the United States. We're trying to declare a disaster here. He's like, no, you can't do that. I'm not authorizing that. Go figure your shit out. And they will, or they won't, but they're not going to get any FEMA. And and you can't get FEMA unless you declare yourself a disaster. And that has to be approved by the president of the United States. And so I don't know what their problem was, flooding probably, but they don't get nothing. They get jack. And she's going to have to explain that to the people of her state. Yeah, I called the president. He says, yeah, pound sand. FEMA, we're not going to send you anything. You're not going to get a debit card. You're not going to get a pin. You're not going to get a FEMA tent. You're not going to get a bottle of water. And the United States of America, figure your shit out. Yeah, figure it out. I guess I'll end up in a El Salvador mega prison one of these days. That's something I'm going to be monitoring, right? When it starts getting sketchy to be doing this kind of work, to be going after these politicians and talk about them being Mussolini'd, right? Whatever that means. Yeah, that's going to be disallowed. I don't care. It's real. It's happening. It's not a hoax. It's the real deal. And people are going to suffer. People are going to suffer. They're going to die, and they'll never know what hit them. They won't get any warnings. They won't get any FEMA. They won't get any national disaster declarations. They won't have the National Guard show up. They'll just be on their own. You got no house? You got money? No? Well, then you're done. And then they'll vanish. They'll vanish without a trace. No one will ever hear their story. And that's how you solve the problem of 30 years you did nothing. You're a politician, and for 30 years you did nothing. You lied to people. You told them it was a hoax, and they couldn't get out of the way. And when it came their turn to be flattened, then that was their turn. They get flattened. And as long as you never recognize that they got flattened, you never allow that data to be collected or shared or collated or put in a database, heaven forbid it's ever in a database, well, then it never happened. Those people didn't exist. It never happened. And that's how you solve global heating. You just don't recognize that it ever happened. So that's where your National Weather Service is going. That's where your data went. That's where your NOAA is going to go. That's where your Storm Prediction Center is going to go. That's where your FEMA is going to go with the FEMA money. That's where your statewide natural disaster declarations are going to go. That's where the National Guard helping you is going to go. It's all going to go into the black hole of it never happened. There you go. I have other rants I want to make. Like I said, I have to say something about. I have to say something really ugly. This is going to be difficult. I have to say something very ugly about solar radiation management. Next time. If you want to learn about solar radiation management and why it's so effing evil, I don't use that word on here very much. Solar radiation management is fucking evil, okay? Subscribe, because that's next. I don't know when. Tomorrow night? I don't know. Maybe later today. Hey, who knows? If I get all fired up, I might be back on here. Like the videos, it helps them to get out there. Not that YouTube likes what I do here. YouTube hates my guts. And if I ever do get much of a following and I do get many viewers and my videos ever get many views, then I have to worry about being discovered and sent to El Salvador to a mega prison. Ermagerd. Anyway, like the videos, subscribe, and hey, we'll see you next time to talk about good old-fashioned evil, shall we? Yeah.